And remember to leave your email for updates.
Tips for academic IELTS Task 1. My name is Ben Worthington from IELTSPodcast.com, and you may recognise my voice. And just for the record, I am from England. I'm a native English speaker, and if you go to IELTSPodcast.com, you can find out lots more about me, about passing IELTS, about the guarantee I offer, and how you can work with me. And also, I'd strongly recommend you sign up for the email list, and there you'll get tips every single week which will help you to pass. Okay, and this is good quality material that's been sent out as well, so I'd strongly recommend that. Now let's have a look at the contents of this podcast. What we're going to do is first look at the band descriptors for academic task 1, then we're going to look at the adverb clauses of comparison, adverb clauses of concession, and then using whereas and while to express contrast. Now, this may sound a little bit tricky, it may sound a little bit advanced, but trust me, the way I'm going to teach it makes it simple. I'm going to try and avoid grammar jargon and focus more on just a really practical way of doing this. And there's a lot of logic behind this, and what we're going to do is break it down into tiny tasks that are easy to digest, absorb, use, and therefore making it a lot easier than the traditional approach. One final thing, get a pen and paper and take notes. This is because it's going to help you. If you're taking active notes, you're going to see the sentences that you hear, and you're going to be writing them down, so you'll have the pen in your paper, the pen in your hand. So you're not only going to be engaging your auditory senses, you're going to be engaging your auditory, visual when you write it down, and kinesthetic because you've got the pen in your hand. So by engaging more senses, it's more likely that you are going to remember these things. Right then, let's get cracking. First of all, let's go to the official band descriptors. Under task achievement for IELTS Academic Task 1, you will see present a clear overview of main trends, differences or stages, and that was for IELTS for band 7 or above. If we use one sentence for the introduction and one sentence for the summary, that leaves about 6 or 7 sentences. Now, with these 6 or 7 sentences, 2 of them we can use for describing differences. Specifically, we allocate 2 sentences which are going to describe differences. Then the other 4 sentences will also have a specific task, and we can talk about those in another podcast. Just by following this strategy and dedicating 1 sentence for the introduction, 1 sentence for the conclusion, and the 2 sentences for differences, we've written 8 sentences. So first of all, for one of these sentences to describe the differences, we're going to use an adverb clause of comparison. I'll give you the basic structure, and then from this we can build on it. We can say, for example, more Europeans prefer football than Americans. More Germans prefer vodka than Colombians. And we can also use the reverse. Fewer Italians drink tea than Austrians. Okay, very simple structure, adverb clause of comparison. Very simple. You just choose 2 different parts of the graph and you just basically write down what you see using that structure. Now, to pick up more points, we can transform it to the passive. Okay, in this case, football was chosen by more Europeans than Americans. If you are taking notes, and hopefully you are, you'll have written those 3 sentences I said before. What I would do now is change them into the passive. So press pause and try and transform them into sentences. The vodka and German and Colombian sentence, and the tea and the Italian and the Austrian sentence. Okay, pause it, have a go, and then check with the answer which I'm about to tell you now. So let's go. Vodka was preferred by more Germans than Colombians. And finally, tea was drank less by Italians than by Austrians. So hopefully you got all of those right. Now, to pick up more points, we can say we can add an adverb to the beginning. And we can say considerably more Europeans prefer football than Americans. Significantly more Germans prefer vodka than Colombians. You can also place them at the end, but be careful. You need to know the rules. For example, if we put it at the end, we can say production fell significantly. But we cannot say significant production fell. That's terrible. Alternatively, we can say clearly market share tumbled, putting it at the front. However, we cannot put it at the end for this one. If we say market share tumbled clearly, that's terrible. Experiment, and the way to experiment is to get it corrected. Okay, try a few different variations, get it corrected, find a native speaker and just ask them, excuse me, could you just tell me which ones are correct and which ones aren't? If you don't have any native speakers around, find an online correction service. There's one at my site at IELTSPodcast.com. The other way we can do it, which is slightly more advanced, we use an adverb clause of concession. And we use this because it implies that something surprising. All I'm going to do is give you a very simple, practical way to use it. First of all, the first tip for using this, what you really need to do is find something that is a difference. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. What I mean by difference is that something that you can contrast significantly. For example, a tiny portion on the pie chart compared to the largest portion. Or if we're talking about a bar chart, we would take the smallest bar and contrast it with the largest bar. If we're talking about a line graph, we would look for the biggest change in the line graph. For example, it's level and then suddenly it just drops to the absolute base of the x-axis, for example. Okay, so it drops right to the bottom. That is a difference. That's a real contrast. So the way we use this is, what we do is we use although, and we say, although sales reached 20 million in 1993, comma, they crashed to just 1 million in 1992. In the principal clause is what is surprising, and then the contrast in the subordinate clause. But I'll say it again. Although, we start off with although, and then we say although sales reached 20 million in 1993, comma, they crashed, the subordinate clause, to just 1 million in 1992. I'll give you some more examples. Although almost every Asian country was experiencing an increase in urban population figures, comma, Bhutan's figures showed a significant decrease. And we've contrasted. Okay, we've just picked up points for taking note of the differences and using a fairly sophisticated sentence structure. Let's have another look. Although the number of Welsh pet owners is at its lowest in 1990, comma, it almost doubles in 1993. Now, the next part of this podcast, we're going to talk about whereas and while. Once again, this is entirely focused on the practical basis. These are the conjunctions, and we're going to use just whereas because while slightly less formal and there's a bit more confusion regarding while. For example, you can use it for comparisons in time. She drove while talking on her mobile, and we can also use it for comparisons on the graph. But for the time being, we're going to use whereas because it's simpler and it sounds slightly more formal, and we can use these in the middle of the sentence. So once again, we're going to use these sentences to show a contrast, two different groups of information. I'll give you an example. Females scored higher in analytical subjects, comma, whereas males scored higher in creative disciplines. We say the first clause, place a comma, followed by whereas, and then our second clause. Let's have another look. Derbyshire allocated the majority of its budget on leisure services, comma, whereas Yorkshire invested hardly any of its budget in leisure. So once again, I hope you are writing these sentences down. Then write a few sentences of your own and get some feedback on those, experiment, and this is how you learn them. Like I said before at the beginning, you've got two different, or even maybe three different structures you can use. You've got the comparison one, which I said before, add an adverb at the beginning to make it a little bit more complex. Then we've got the although to show something more surprising, and we've got a contrast with the whereas. This is just to show a comparison. I'll just give you a few more sentences which you can use. Copy these down and change the vocabulary, but write them down because they're useful. Let's go. For most of the years, output from English factories grew, whereas in Wales, it actually fell. Now, this would probably be either a line graph or a bar chart, I'm guessing. Another sentence. In 2014, 33% of visitors were from Asia, whereas in 1992, the proportion was just 11%. Obviously, that would be a pie chart. We are coming towards an end, so hopefully you've got a couple of notes. Start using the sentences. Write out lots of sentences. You can get a massive resource pack at IELTSPodcast.com. Now, there's 5 things you can do to increase your chances of passing the exam. First one, sign up for the tutorials. Sign up with your email, with your best email address, and you'll get lots of decent material, resources, tips, and more tutorials like this in your inbox every week. Fill your phone up with these podcasts. You can fill it up with the MP3s as well. Listen to this 24/7. I'm doing the same with some material that I'm trying to learn, and it's a really good way. What you do is just listen all the time and just let it seep into your brain, and let it fill your brain with this information. And you don't even have to work while you do this. You can just be in the supermarket and you just keep on listening to the recordings. Do this especially for maybe for the speaking test, and you can respond, or even for the model essays which I read, and let your brain soak in all this information. The third thing you can do is subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just jump on Google, put IELTS Podcast YouTube, subscribe to that, and you'll get to see the actual videos if you're more of a visual learner. And of course, subscribe to the iTunes podcast. That's the 4th thing. And the 5th thing, if you're having any problem at all, send me an email, ben@IELTSPodcast.com. Final thoughts. 1, if you're having problems, get help. Send me an email. Go and find somebody else. 2, this is not impossible. I was just talking to a student a couple of days ago, Mega. You'll hear the interview in about a week or 2. She took her test 13 times. 13 times, all right? What I want to say is that it's not impossible, and if you do get the right resources, the right help, you will pass. You've just got to keep pushing on. And if motivation is a problem, jump onto YouTube and just put motivation. Each person is different. What you need to do is basically just find out what works for you.
Thanks for listening to IELTSPodcast.com.